This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by the co-founder of QA Deputy, a tool in the QA space. I'm very excited for this one. We don't have a ton of people in the QA space. Scott, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Thanks, Jay. Good to see you, man. Everything's
Good to see you. It's been a while. We used to talk more. I feel like I need to talk to you more. You're out in beautiful California. Tell me how, growing up, I'm assuming you grew up out that way. Tell me where you grew up, and did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur later in life?
Yeah, no, I actually did not grow up in Southern California. I grew up in Montana. I was born and raised in Montana. So Northwest Montana, a town called Kalispell. You probably haven't heard of that, but you probably heard of Glacier Park. So Glacier Park, so where I grew up is probably 30 minutes from Glacier Park. Lots of Great Lakes, lots of skiing. And yeah, so we get back there at least a couple of times a year. In fact, I just got back from a week-long vacation out there about 2 weeks ago. It's awesome. We love going back there. It was a great place to grow up. And honestly, I wouldn't mind going back there now. I ended up in Southern California by taking a job offer. I grew up in Kalispell, Montana, played a lot of baseball. I was fortunate enough to go play baseball at a small college in North Dakota, small private college, which I'd never been there until the day I arrived there, which was pretty interesting. So I stayed there for 4 years. I got my degree, and then immediately after college, I landed a job in Bismarck, North Dakota, doing accounting software, which isn't terribly exciting. It was a good opportunity straight out of school. The accounting platform we were working on had like tons of different modules. I specialized on the payroll side. I learned a ton. I got some good mentoring. And then I was looking for a way out of North Dakota. North Dakota is like beautiful in the summer, awesome. When it hits winter, it's super cold, super windy, and not a ton to do, honestly. So I was looking for an out. Most of my buddies from college were exiting, either going back to Montana or Southern California, something like that. And I randomly one day got a call from a girl that I went to high school with and somewhat kept in touch with her throughout college. And she had made the jump from college. She was on the East Coast doing college and started working for a company out in San Diego where they were doing large-scale document imaging solutions. Essentially, they'd go in and you think like a Department of Revenue, for example, like all these tax forms that come in. They get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, every year. They need to digitize those, capture the data, and then export it, store it somewhere, and then either collect money or pay money out in the case of a Department of Revenue. So we did all kinds of large-scale implementations like that, and it was an awesome 8 or 9 years doing that. I learned a ton. I got to travel a lot because every customer we did at that time, most of the work wasn't done remotely. We would fly out there, spend a week or a couple weeks, and do these projects. And so it was cool because I learned like top to bottom IT projects, right? And I was super young. I was like 22, 23, so it was a pretty cool opportunity. And then the only challenge that I had with that position was it was pretty niche, right? So like you probably don't talk to a lot of people that do document imaging solutions every day, right? So I wanted to broaden my horizons. I felt like I got a lot of experience. And then another friend of mine that lived in San Diego, he had started his own business, primarily on the merchant credit card processing side. And so they built the business up just being that middleman, merchant processing. And then they wanted to offer other solutions to their customers. And so the first thing they thought about was payroll. It didn't really pan out day one. So they took a step backwards and said, what if we can capture that time and attendance data and then feed it to payroll and then eventually get into payroll. And when I came over, we were just launching that time and attendance product. And that company was called Processing Point, now WorkWell Technologies. And we've got probably 10 or 11 different products across time and attendance. Some of them like super old school, punch clocks where you stick a card in it, things on movies. Some more sophisticated, and that's where we were able to grab some market share by introducing the first hardware device that was cloud connected and all the services were in the cloud. And so we beat everybody to market on that, and then we were just on an uphill trajectory from there. So that's where I've been the last, 12 years, heading up engineering teams over there, and that's really where QA Deputy was born, and that's where the idea came about.
What position did you play in baseball?
Yeah, that was a lot of information. I played a little bit of second, but mostly like center field. Yeah,
Okay. All
yeah.
right. And how far did you get in your college career before you realized it was going to be a slog of
Yeah,
a career to get anywhere further?
yeah. It's like anybody, like when they're a kid, they think they're gonna go to the pros and play for the Phillies. I
Right.
swear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was good. Like when in childhood, all stars and all those things, and then I did well in high school. Got to college. Pretty early on, I realized that a lot of these kids are a lot better than me. So I ended up sticking it out for a year, gave it my all. And then I had actually thought about transferring after that just because like I was like, look, I came to North Dakota to play baseball. I'm not going to play baseball anymore. I'm going to go where my buddies are, like Bozeman, Montana State, or Missoula. But thankfully, I thought about it and I was getting good grades and doing the things that I should be doing, not getting into too much trouble. So I decided to stick it out. And so I stayed there for the 4 years.
And was there a culture shock when you moved from, because you came from Montana and then you went to, I guess, a similarly, I'll be nice and say desolate in North Dakota to Southern California. Was there like a big shift for you just like personally to make between those places?
I think that there's two primary things. One, obviously, I just didn't know a whole lot of people, right? And so that took some time. I did have one colleague from high school that was out there as well, so that helped. I think like if I look at like what we would do in the summers, it's pretty similar. Like you go to the river, you go to the lake, whatever, play golf. But winters are vastly different. I grew up skiing every weekend, up skiing. Winters in North Dakota, I had to figure out something to do. It's windy, it's cold, zero mountains within 8 or 9 hours. So that was probably the biggest thing is just like figuring out like what do you do for fun around here in the winter.
Yeah, I think every time I hear North Dakota, I think Carson Wentz failed Messiah for the Eagles. He's still trying to find a job.
Yeah.
He was in one of those schools up there, right? Was it North
Yeah,
Dakota State?
he went to North Dakota State. There's a lot of
Okay.
good like Trey Lance, all those guys. He might have failed like your team. I think he's financially he succeeded though.
Oh yeah, I think he made 110 million or
Yeah.
something I read the other day. I think he's just fine. He'll be able to afford quite a few hunting trips that he likes to go on. I
Yeah.
guess that's what you do up there, right? It's the only thing you do
Yeah.
is go shoot stuff in the winter. All right, so tell me about QA deputy. You mentioned kind of the genesis of it a little bit. I find it's such an interesting space, right? Because as somebody who maybe a little bit opposite, I did a development degree, loved programming, but didn't want to do it professionally. Like I love doing it on the side. Like I love like making stuff and doing game stuff. But I knew I wasn't gonna go be a great programmer. I just felt that through the course of my degree. And I got bailed out. I went and did QA instead, and I love it. And it's made a whole career of it. And now I have a business doing it. But the one thing I struggle with as somebody who loves the idea of making a product is who the hell are you selling to, right? Like you're trying to create these projects and these, and if you're not in the enterprise space, I feel like there's just this mismatch of even people even know what QA is or what it's supposed to be, from small business up to medium and even some large size business, what it's actually supposed to be. When you set out to make QA deputy, did you have to calibrate it all and just go, who is going to even buy a product in QA? Who am I selling at, and what does it actually have to do? Because test case management, automation, there's a few kind of pillars of QA, and I think there's really only a few main companies that do a lot of those things. Tell me about just breaking into a weird space that I'm sure is not super friendly to just creating a product in.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the way that we looked at it from the beginning is we went out. So we were a growing team at WorkWell, right? And yeah, at the time, I don't know, I probably had 4 or 5 QAs and maybe I don't know, a dozen developers. And we were doing a lot of the things that you probably hear every day, keeping track of things in spreadsheets and then having to manually, and then reporting becomes a huge nightmare. And so we were trying to mature. And so we went out to look for a product to help us wrangle all that QA, not madness, but processes and reporting and metrics, all that stuff. And that's really where it started, was our initial search. And so we went out, we evaluated, because like we're not the only game in town. Everybody knows that, right? If you look at test management, there's plenty of game in town. If you look at automation, that's also obviously growing very rapidly. And just as a point, I feel like the last 10 years, and maybe you share a similar opinion, has grown tremendously in terms of tooling and technology. Like if you rewind 10 years ago, like you look at competition, it's probably 1 or 2 test management, and on the automation side that's commercial, not open source, again, maybe 1 or 2. So anyways, we started looking at the tools that we wanted to leverage to mature the team and help with some internal processes. And we tried everything, right? And ultimately, what we found was a couple of things. One, we were relatively price sensitive, right? And a lot of the tools in the marketplace we felt were priced higher than they should be, and probably because they could get away with it at the time. You know what I mean? And then number two is we didn't want to have to go out and invest a whole bunch of time in learning a new technology, right? And like some platforms, like you're gonna see the benefit, but you got to spend 3 or 4 months working up to that benefit. We want to see at least a benefit like first week, right? And it's just easy to use, easy to learn, did the basics. And then the other thing that we found is it wasn't integrating with the things that we wanted it to integrate. We wanted to make it easy, right? We're bringing on a new tool. We wanted the tool to help solve our problems, not create additional problems or create yet another platform where we have to move data to and fro, right? And again, at that time, moving data to and fro between systems wasn't as easy as it is today. The Zapiers were pretty young, those sorts of things, right? APIs weren't as extensive. So ultimately what we did, we evaluated all these products. We realized that none of them were easy enough. None of them we felt like the pricing was great for. And then it didn't integrate well. So we were talking about Slack, we're talking about Ghost Inspector, we're talking about Jira. Everybody did Jira, we know that. But there's other bug tracking or project management tools out there, obviously. We wanted everything that we needed in a test management solution, but we didn't want to have to wait for it. And after evaluating all these products, we took a step back and said, look, we build software for a living. What if we just rolled our own, right? What if we just built our own? We've got some of these core concepts that we know we want. We know we want to make it simple. We know we want to integrate with other tools so that we don't have to move data out of one system into another. And we jumped into it and we said, look, let's just go build this for ourselves. And we did that. We started the projects, just laying out high-level initiatives like test suites, test cases, how do we map automation, how do we use communication tools within the platform. And about a month in, we had like kind of another epiphany and said, look, we made the decision to go and build a piece of software internally for very specific needs. One, we wanted it to be easy, we wanted it to be cost-effective, and we wanted to integrate. And so we said, this is silly. Again, we build software for a living, we sell to other businesses. Why don't we treat this project just the same way as we treat other ones? So we took a step back, started to genericize the platform so that it wasn't specific to like a WorkWell technologies. And every decision we made from that day forward was all about, okay, it's how are we going to solve our problem? But then take a step back and will that solve the problem for the masses? Or is there a way that we can solve this problem so that it's generic enough so that other people can use it?
So the QA manager budget is not huge for tooling, I think, typically, right? Like it's typically like from a CFO or CEO perspective, it's get people to either manually test it or build automation, which is supposed to save time on the manual side. So it's really all about like managing resources, I think, from a QA manager's seat. So did you guys have to aim this at someone else besides QA managers? Who are your targets that you're trying to go after?
Yeah, so obviously QA folks, that's our target, but we're also we look at product managers, right? Product managers have a vested interest in understanding and seeing in real time, like progress of QA testing, right? Product managers want to get a feature or release out just as bad as like a CTO or a QA resource, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at product managers, but we're also looking at the dev side too. We want to give dev the access to these tools as well because they want to see when somebody's in full regression, they want to immediately see evidence of success or failure, right? And that success could be like, hey, a test case passes, or failure could be like, hey, this failed, but it's always failed and we're just going to deal with it. Or it's, hey, we created a bug and we deem this as must fix before we release. And we look at, obviously QA, we look at product managers, and we look at leadership in engineering, but we even go, any developer contributing to a project, we look at those guys too because they have a vested interest, just as a product manager does, just as a QA lead might have, in ensuring that the checks and balances around QA are being done, that we're feeding that information in real time so folks can make decisions on how to move forward with their products. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess what I was thinking is those guys don't necessarily have the money though, right? Like those are so that you're creating more champions for the product inside of the org and then going upstream that way.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to show the value across various departments because, like, to your point, I think a lot of people look at QA and say they're just in a box making sure that things are working as expected. While like the magic happens in dev and product, and then we obviously service and support the product. But the reality is, like, everybody has that vested interest in the QA processes, and so like by being inclusive of these other resources within the organization, it helps drive home ultimately, hopefully, a sale, right?
Right.
And they see that value.
Yeah, I just didn't. I wasn't sure if like the CTO, VP of engineering level was a little more closely tied to having the money to make the calls to do the investment in a tool like that, as opposed to. And I guess that's back to my original thought was like QA managers get budget for resources typically. I think not, less about tooling, less about, especially I would imagine test case management software budget isn't something on a line item that like the CTO and the CFO talk about until like years down the line. So that's why I was just wondering if that C level is something you attack because you're like, we need to get to the guys that are the decision makers that are going to spend the money.
Yeah, and certainly we are. We know that, and we'll try to access like a CTO or VP of engineering who really has control over that budget. But again, we don't want to limit ourselves to that. We want to expose the product to other, I guess, departments that historically maybe didn't have access to these systems, but we feel there's benefit for them having access. And like to go like a step further, and I think I touched on this earlier, is like when we were evaluating those tools, we felt it was expensive. And it's part of the reason why we came in at a lower cost point is one, like we wanted to be it more accessible to those other departments or an easier conversation with that CTO or VP. But also we just felt like we were pricing it right. And so like we come in at probably 40% cheaper than anybody else, right? And that's true today. We've never done a single price increase. We've never really had anybody balk at the cost because ultimately they're going to go look at another solution and they're like, oh, these guys are double. Yeah, at the end of the day, yes, we're certainly going after the CTO or the VP of engineering, but we don't like to limit ourselves to that because we think there's value and they can help push the narrative for we need this product.
Got it. Yeah, and certainly there's a million ways to sell things. So who was the first customer? You don't have to tell me names, but how did you switch from this internal tool that you guys are building to finally handing this off to somebody to pay you for it?
Yeah, so as we started to build this out, we actually ate our own dog food for about 2 years, right? So internally, which was the original goal, we started on the very first version of it, which was really basic, right? It's like, how do I create a test suite, and how do I put test cases in there, and how do I mark them as pass-failed? We did that for 2 years, and then we started to reach out to my family and friends more than anything, right? So, hey, I know a resource that used to work here, or I used to work with at a different job that I know is doing QA over here. Let's have a conversation, because that's an easier conversation to have, right? That's that warm lead. And so ultimately that's how we acquired our first customer. An individual that used to work for WorkWell had moved to the East Coast, started a new job as a test lead out there, and he had actually reached out to me because he knew we were in the works on this project and said, hey, where are you guys at? And I said, we're getting close. We've been using it internally and it's doing a lot of the things. We have this roadmap and it's going to take some time to get there. But if you want to take a shot, we'd love to have you. And so we did. And so it was a pretty easy conversion from that perspective. And we did that a couple of times with a couple of other resources. And we learned a lot, right? And we pivoted. Even that mindset that we had taken into it where we need to make a generic, part of those kind of first customers, call it beta, call it whatever you want, we learned that we didn't do the best job on some of those. And so we had to take a step back and reevaluate and adjust and then march forward. It was a small customer. I think there was like 3 QA resources. But honestly, it was the perfect size because their needs weren't too great, right? They were doing a little automation. They were doing some Ghost Inspector, I believe, which we had already built that integration because that was one of the things that we wanted to do day one. And for the most part, it went off successfully. Again, we learned some things, we made some tweaks, made it a little more generic, but ultimately it was a super great experience. And it really helped, I think, that we just had an individual on the other side that maybe wasn't championing it, but he knew the quality of work that we've done at WorkWell. He knew the vision for the product and trusted us and wanted something affordable that they could run with. Because they ultimately, at that time, I think they were using just Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, that's baby's first QA is spreadsheets. But yeah, shout out to Justin Clem, the actual founder of Ghost Inspector, who sold his company twice and was on the podcast. If you had to start over again today with everything you learned, and you were going to start from scratch tomorrow for QA deputy, what would be step one?
I think step one would be what I've alluded to. I think we did a good job day one, a decent job day one. When we took that initial step back and said, let's genericize this, we did a pretty good job. And like I said, we had to make some tweaks as we got into beta to fulfill that generic platform vision. But I think the one thing that we didn't do as well as we should have, when we looked at like the first year and a half, 2 years of the product, let's say we had 10 like major features we were going to look to build. I think we were laser focused on those 10 and didn't build out that 3 to 5 year roadmap. And I think some of those early decisions we made when we were building those features made it difficult to execute on those features that we wanted to do 3 to 5 years down the road. And by that, having to go back and refactor things, right? Which is challenging when you've got customers on the platform and you've got to migrate data and do certain things to make it essentially accept the new features.
How would you have helped prevent that? I'm curious. Like, how would you have done it differently?
I think we were again. I think we were laser focused on what we felt were like the primary 7 or 8 things. 7 or 8. It could be like 8 or 20 or 30, whatever that is. I think we were laser focused on that. I think just trying to visualize what we were going to look like in 5 years would have been key. Just because we didn't necessarily make mistakes as we started to add those features in. It just drew out the timeline to implement those features and caused a lot more work.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing for marketing today? We talked a little bit before the show. You guys are very invested in the quality of QA deputy and spend a lot of your resources on dev. What do you guys do to get the word out and to grow the brand?
Yeah, so you're right. We are heavily focused on dev and we spend a lot of money there. On the marketing side, we rely on word of mouth, which is good. And it's gotten better over the years, right? As we've gotten the product out there to customers and we've got utilization, I think just like brand recognition has gotten better. And so that's helped, and that's in a sense free. We do some Google ads, we do some newsletters, and then we also look to work with resellers like a JDA QA who already have a portfolio of customers or new customers coming in that potentially need tooling. Maybe some of it's test management, maybe some of it's automation, but we feel like we're a good fit for that, given the low cost and the ease of use. So we've started to invest a little more heavily in kind of these resellers. But yeah, it's mostly word of mouth, Google ads, the newsletters here and there, and then partners like yourself.
Partnerships and the friends and family plan to get things started are two things that come up a lot, and I think they're very integral to growing any business. And I think that initial, hey, we're working on something, or hey, we have this new service, I hear it. I do a ton of these interviews a week, and I hear it very frequently. And I think that's a huge, just ask. I was on somebody else's podcast yesterday. He's like, how did you grow your podcast? How'd you get so many reviews? I said, I asked, right? Yeah. Like, you just ask. You just can't be afraid to ask. And it sounds like you guys weren't. So let me wrap with one final question, non-business related. Just you as a founder, an entrepreneur. If you could do anything on earth and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
If I could do anything on earth and I knew it wouldn't fail. Gosh, that's a hard one, Jay.
I save it for last.
Exactly. I don't know that I would do anything drastically different than I am right now. I think we've got ideas for other products. I think jumping in and building out those products is something that like motivates me every day when I wake up. I think that's my passion. I don't want to be stuck in an office cranking out code or just leading teams. That's great, and that is what I do on a daily basis. But like kind of the passion is around building new products, because that's exciting, right? The sky's the limit, and you get out of it what you put into it. Typically, not everything succeeds. Sometimes you fail, but that's the stuff that excites me on a day-to-day basis. It's not, hey, we're gonna toss feature X on a dashboard. That's just business. That's doing the work and growing the product. What's exciting is taking something from nothing to a product that I can take to a business and they'll be happy with, and they'll solve some of those problems. So I skirted the question a little bit because in some respects that's what I do every day. But I think just doing that more and taking some of these other ideas and executing on it, that's from in a personal and a business aspect, that's what excites me. So
I thought for sure you were gonna go start a ski resort in Glacier Park.
Yeah, I
That's
started school
somewhere
as
near
well.
Glacier. That's the Berry Resort
Yeah.
in Glacier Park. No, that's a fair answer. I think launching new things is exciting. I think the failure part of that is what kind of makes it exciting though too though, right? Because if you couldn't fail and you were just winging off, just hit after hit, maybe it would lose a little luster, but it's a fair enough answer. I'll accept it and we'll end there. Scott, I love talking to you, brother. We got to stay in touch more. If people want to reach out to you directly, or if they want to find more about QA Deputy, how do they do that?
Yeah, if you just hit up our website, qadeputy.com, to learn about the product. From there, you can sign up for demos. It's a one-on-one demo, so it's not a big group demo. It's concentrating on that one individual. If they want to contact me directly, it's just sberry, SBERY, at qadeputy.com.
Beautiful. All right, man. Stay cool the rest of the summer, and we'll catch up and stay in touch, brother. All right. It's great having you on. I'll talk to you again. Thanks, and see you, man. Scott, see you later.
Bye.